And we are back. And we got some really good news. Thank you to all our listeners. We actually broke into Apple charts yesterday, 238 Apple Podcast, top podcast in the United States, health and fitness category. Dr. Rudy, congratulations.
I'm so excited. Well, listen, when you said 238, I didn't know what it meant. When you said top 1% of health and fitness podcasts, I was like, yes, I like to be in top 1%. So listen, I'm getting a lot of great feedback from listeners, from my patients. I'm so grateful for you, Vivek. I love our interaction. I love how you ground and direct me. Looking for so many more like this.
Likewise. I mean, I feel I'm privileged to get this opportunity. So I really cherish it. And the more important thing, we are creating value for people, listeners. And that's the goal, right? Like the number one value is like, how do we get to 1 million people through digitally? Like that's the goal. So let's get started. Today is a special one, and we are going to talk about GLP-1s, but beyond weight loss. And Dr. Rudy, obviously, we are just coming out of Thanksgiving. Many people are thinking about how to get back on track, and especially with their health. While we are on this topic of GLPs, can you give a quick overview of GLP-1s and why you believe they are so much transformative beyond weight management?
Completely. So, GLP-1 medication are my favorite medications to use. And we're going to do a long talk about this today because my approach to GLP-1 is it's not every doctor or clinician that sees it the same way as me. But my experience with GLP-1 started 19 years ago when they first came out, when they were first FDA-approved. So I can proudly say that I'm one of the few physicians that were early adopters of GLP-1 medication for weight loss. And I think I'm one of the physicians that has the most active patients on GLP-1. Between my 3 clinics, I have about 3,000 patients taking GLP-1 medications actively. So the experience that I've accumulated during this time, the first-hand clinical experience, it's hard to duplicate this. And it's interesting because during Thanksgiving, a lot of families were talking about GLP-1 medications because people could not eat as much. So people had to even change some of their recipes because when you take GLP-1 medications, you don't want to eat as much fat, you don't want to drink as much. So, unfortunately, I love the tradition of Thanksgiving, and I love it mostly because it's a day that you remind yourself to spend time with your family, to be grateful. You were part of the 3Gs, right? To be grateful to really do this. But really, the amount of food that we eat during those days, when I first moved from Haiti, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy that we eat that much. I'm part of it now. It's good. But definitely watching what you eat, watching your calories, really important. So GLP-1 put a dent on Thanksgiving dinner. So let me start with GLP-1, and we'll start from the beginning. So GLP-1 medication, it stands for glucagon-like peptide-1 medications. It was actually, it's a hormone that's secreted mostly in the gut, and it's part of what we call the incretin hormones. And they are very important for digestion because what GLP-1s do mostly, when you eat food, when you eat sugar or carbs, it helps your body secrete insulin so it can digest the blood sugar and then enter it into the liver and your muscle and transforms it into energy. So it's a really, really important molecule because now we know that in our world, there's about 70% of our population either overweight or obese. More than 40% of the population have insulin resistance or prediabetes. So the ability of our body to digest carbs, to digest sugar is impaired. So GLP-1 medications are playing a big role into restoring that metabolic function. So they were first FDA approved in 2005 for diabetes. The molecule was discovered in the 1980s, and it took almost 20 years to be able to be put into clinical use. 2005, the first one came out. I started using it. It was called exenatide. You will notice that all the GLP-1 medication will have a tide, T-I-D-E at the end. Semaglutide, Tirzepatide. So exenatide was the first one. I work at a Native American health center in Miami, in Florida. where unfortunately diabetes has a high prevalence in Native Americans. So in my clinic where I work there's a lot of patients with diabetes. And I started using exenatide on them back in 2005, 2006. And I took almost all the patients off of insulin because it works so well for diabetes, because it released your own insulin. So that was my experience. So I used all the first, second, or third generation of the tide medications, the GLP-1. It wasn't for weight loss yet. It was only for diabetes. They weren't that good for weight loss back then. The first generation was mostly for diabetes. Then in 2014, the first GLP-1 became FDA approved for weight loss. There was liraglutide, Saxenda. So the studies show that, wow, now it's showing that it causes weight loss. So they got the first FDA approval. I used some of those back in 2014, but they weren't great yet for weight loss. You would get maybe patients losing 10 pounds, 8 pounds, so modest weight loss. I used them, but they weren't great. I used GLP-1s at that time mostly for diabetes. Then in 2018, the big breakthrough happened with semaglutide, which is Ozempic, and everybody knows about Ozempic. Ozempic. It's a little commercial that everybody knows about because that was the most effective for weight loss. So the makers of Ozempic, which is Novo Nordisk, did something to the molecule. And with my research, what I've seen is that compared to the previous generation, Ozempic was able to cross the blood-brain barrier. So it was able to go into the brain and really affect the brain. And that's why it became so much better for appetite control. And it was so good that it became a cultural phenomenon. I remember watching the Oscars. That was back in 2018, 2019, when Kim Kardashian said that she was taking Ozempic, when everybody was saying, oh my God, it's a miracle drug. So it became a cultural phenomenon. So from 2018, I started using semaglutide for weight loss, although it didn't have the FDA approval yet. But we know I was getting amazing, phenomenal results with my patients. Then finally, the FDA did a study with WeGovy, which is the same as Ozempic, and it became FDA approved for weight loss. So now everything I was saying, my colleagues who didn't believe when I was telling them that this is really good for weight loss, now that the FDA approved it, they started kind of be like, okay, there may be something, but we're not done yet. Then in 2021, Tirzepatide came out, Mounjaro, which is even better than semaglutide. And this is when I think scientists are so amazing, right? We keep improving on science. I give our scientists so much credit. I compare GLP-1s to the iPhone, right? It's a great product, but each generation got a little better. And when you compare Tirzepatide to semaglutide, much, much, much better. I always say I loved semaglutide, but I'm in awe in front of Tirzepatide. Because what's different with Tirzepatide is that it also affects another receptor called the GIP receptor. And that made it that with the Tirzepatide, you are getting more weight loss and fewer side effects. So now Tirzepatide became the most fine-tuned GLP-1 medication, the latest generation that is the best for weight loss. I like to call Tirzepatide the iPhone 16 of weight loss. Semaglutide is the iPhone 10. Still good, but let's go for iPhone 16.
Yeah, this is great. I think this is the first time ever I heard from start to finish, and I'm sure many people will benefit because a lot of time we are confused. I'm like, what is the difference between Mounjaro or Ozempic for that matter? And this is like hard to understand for us. So this is a great summary and great start. Also,
Good
by the
point,
way,
Vivek. And why this is important? Because a lot of patients, even doctors, will say, yeah, those are great medication, but we don't know what the long-term side effects of those medications because they are new. They are not new. The first GLP-1 medication was FDA approved in 2005. So we have 19 years of experience, and most of the long-term studies are showing benefits, decreasing risk of Alzheimer's dementia, decreasing risk of heart disease, of cancer, of fatty liver, of kidney disease, of any neurodegenerative disease. Like the list keeps going on and on and on. And it almost sounds too good to be true. It almost sounds like this is an infomercial. One medication can do all of this. Why? Because it addresses insulin resistance and inflammation. Those are the two things that are at the base of almost every chronic disease, chronic metabolic disease that we're seeing in our world right now.
Yeah. And I remember that maybe in 2021 or 2022, somebody whom I just know it on LinkedIn, and I had heard this lady on podcast long ago, and she messaged me, and she was so excited. I was like, "What happened? How's life?" And she was like, "I'm doing so good. I just took this Manjaro. I lost 30 pounds, and this is great. I feel the best I ever felt." And literally in text, I can hear her. Like that's what the excitement level was. Like, so, so this is great. But, like everything, there is also comes part of the negative sides or the sides of shame or stigma associated with, right? There's those talks of like, this is a shortcut to weight loss. Why do you think this stigma exists, and how do you help? Like, what do you tell people, your patients especially, how to overcome it and get them not to think like that?
Yeah, and to me, that's one of the most important points when we're talking about GLP-1s, because it's associated with weight loss, with obesity. There's a lot of shame associated with it. When you think about it, a lot of celebrities have used this to lose weight, and they did not want to come out and say it. First example, Oprah. It took Oprah so many years to come out and say she used a GLP-1 medication. Oprah was 70 years old when she lost 40 pounds. She said she went walking. I'm sorry, you've been trying to walk and lose that weight for 40 years, Oprah. I was so glad when she came out and said that. But it showed that if even Oprah had shame, that felt like too self-conscious to say that, she didn't want to attract, negative comments. Imagine the average person. So people will tell you that. And even doctors will do this. You go to the doctor, you need to lose weight, they see your cholesterol is high. The doctor was like, well, just eat less and exercise. You come back a year later, you gain 5-6 pounds. The doctor was like, come on, I told you to eat less and exercise. So in our society now, most people know what they should eat. They know what they should. There's enough information. You chat GPT now, you tell chat GPT, give me a diet for the next 14 days. Those are the things I like. Those are the things I don't like. It will give you a full diet. So it's not like people don't know what they should do, but doing it every day when the food tastes so good, when you really have almost micro addiction to food, is the difficult thing. And people who deal with weight issues already have a lot of self-resentment, right? A lot of people that I see have this. They're like, everything is going well in my world, but I just cannot lose that weight. I just cannot get rid of that X food addiction. Some people it's sugar, some people it's crunchy and salty, some people it's snacking, some people it's stress eating, some people it's social eating, mindless eating, and then you find yourself, that's the true definition of addiction. When I see patients in my weight loss clinic, they're like, I know what I should do, but I keep doing it despite the negative consequences that happen in my life. So that's the definition of addiction. So what GLP-1 medication have been able to show us is that the weight issues and obesity is not a willpower issue. It is a neurobiological problem that's happening in your brain, that there's almost a short circuit that happens in your brain that you keep having whatever addiction it is, whether it is to sweets, to carbs, to salty foods, whatever it is. We each have a little addiction that we want to see. And then that's why we see that Semaglutide became so successful at helping with weight loss, because it was able to cross the blood-brain barrier and go into the brain and almost shut down the connection between the release of dopamine from the reward center of the brain to some of our oral fixation. So now patients who take GLP-1, they'll tell you this. They don't get the same enjoyment they used to have for food. I call it food anhedonia. You lost pleasure in eating. There's another word that they're talking about, food noise. And people who deal with weight issues will tell you that. They think about food all the time. It occupies so much real estate in their head. They wake up in the morning. What am I going to eat? Oh, I want bread. I should not have bread. What am I having for lunch? I can't believe I ate pizza yesterday. Oh, what am I having for dinner? Oh, I want some ice cream. All day long, those thoughts, those ruminating thoughts keep coming along. You put a patient on a GLP-1, in my clinical practice, you'll see a good 75% of them. After 4 to 8 weeks, they're like, I'm not thinking about food as much anymore. It's so liberating for a patient to get rid of that food noise. So now you see something that is so powerful into combating addiction. And then now if somebody uses it to help them be healthier, and society shames them. Society tells them, no, just man up, put yourself up, do it the natural way. How crazy is this? It's like somebody needing thyroid medication, and you tell them, no, you don't need thyroid medication. You can do it. Just eat better and your thyroid will get fixed. So this is my passion on this, because I deal with patients in my clinic every day who take the medication and have a little guilty feeling. Don't want to tell their significant other or their friends that they are taking it, because even them, they feel like they're cheating. First, there's no cheating in health, because anything that we use to help our health be better could be considered cheating. So if you take blood pressure medication for blood pressure, for hypertension, are you cheating? If you take thyroid medication for slow thyroid, are you cheating? If you're cheating for health, I'm all for it.
I think media does a terrible job in shaping these narratives when they pick and choose people about this Ozempic face. This is a thing, and they just trying to like shame people for losing weight and looking good per se.
Yeah.
But and that's where a big challenge comes out to. And also, like you said, most people are very, very sensitive about their weight issues. And now if you shame them, it kind of very destructive in a way. It's not going to benefit anyone.
Well, you're
Uh,
actually doing harm to that patient. You
yeah,
really, because don't you think that the patient know all this? They're thinking all this. People dealing with overweight and obesity, they are their worst critics. They have such a difficult inner dialogue. When I sit down and I go deeply with my patients, even when I'm talking about patients who've achieved success in, their career, type A personality, when you see that you have this one thing you can't get to, it's deeply disturbing, and the inner dialogue completely changes. And you can see I can give a patient a medication, and it changes the inner dialogue. It changes the person's willpower. It changes the person's metabolism. This is very powerful. And I think those medications should be celebrated for what they do, not condemned. Of course, like everything in life, there are side effects, and we're going to go over the side effects and ways to mitigate them. But the side effect profile is pretty low for the amount of benefits that you do. So if you do the risk benefits ratio, the benefits completely outweigh the risk. And there's ways to mitigate the risk. And there's ways to really decrease the risk, and especially with Tirzepatide. With Tirzepatide, I guess less than 2% of GI symptoms. It's not 0%. And there are some patients who still cannot take it, or I put them at very low doses. But Tirzepatide is so well tolerated, so much better tolerated when compared to Semaglutide or the earlier generations, that it's a shame when I see a patient who needs to lose weight or have diabetes or have heart disease, and their doctors don't want to put them on the medication because they say either one, we don't know what the long-term studies are, false, we have the studies. Number two, they said, come on, you can do it. Just try to knuckle it down, white knuckle it, and you can do it. It's crazy that we're still talking like this.
yeah.
And I'm going to say something. I have a love-hate relationship with GLP-1 medications. I love what they do for patients, but I hate that we have to use them. I wish I could just tell the patient, eat less and exercise, then 6 months later they come back, they lost 30 pounds. That would be perfect. And if somebody's able to do this, I applaud them. If you're somebody, you can keep your weight and you don't need a GLP-1, good for you. But don't shame or don't point finger at somebody who needs to use it.
Yeah, I think the reason why I feel this is such a transformative thing is because, all those people who have struggled with weight, and they've struggled a lot, and it gets really difficult to get results. It's never ever people were able to get results without the sheer hard work for 6 months or at least 90 days. And now for once, there is something that can actually turn around things for them, and that becomes their motivation to change their life. And I think that is far bigger of a catalyst to living a better health. And this is where it's so transformative, because people taste the success, and then now they know how to do what to change, right? So that creates it.
So
Um,
one thing you mentioned there that's really important. It's that's a human nature psychological trait that we have. Results beget results. You lose the first 5 pounds, all of a sudden you're motivated. You lose the first 10 pounds, you're like, oh my God. You lose the first 15 pounds, you want to continue. Then you get texts like what this woman you told me sent you the text, and you could feel her excitement. Imagine me. So today I did my weight loss clinic. I saw 80 patients on GLP-1. I'll say 78 of them were all positive. It's a fun place at my office. People are laughing. People are happy. They're like, I have control. I'm losing weight. Even if they didn't get to their weight goal yet. But results beget results. You lose the first 5 pounds, you feel empowered to continue. That's the power of GLP-1.
Totally agree.
So
Let's
now let
talk.
me take a little bit to talk about side effects, because
Yeah.
that's important. And I don't want the medical community or people listening to me to say, oh, I'm trying to kind of make it seem too easy, right? GLP-1 medications do have side effects, but I like this English saying, don't throw the baby with the bathwater. Just because something, has some side effects doesn't mean we're not going to use it. Let's learn what it is. Let's find ways to mitigate it. And that's what we do at my clinic. So because the main mechanism of action of GLP-1 medication is that it slows down your digestion. It slows down the intestinal motion, your gastric emptying. So because of that, side effects like constipation, acid reflux, indigestion, nausea, and possibly vomiting can happen. There's even been reported cases of intestinal obstruction. Very rare. There was one case that made a big noise on social media that everybody was pointing to. I've been doing this for 19 years. I've never had one case. I had 2 cases of acute pancreatitis back in 2009, 2010 with the first generations of GLP. Now I have more than 3,000 active patients between semaglutide and tirzepatide, mostly tirzepatide. I haven't had one case of acute pancreatitis. So the side effect is pretty low. And those GI side effects, the indigestion, the constipation, you can mitigate that. The cleaner you eat, the less chance of having those side effects. That's what I tell my patients. If you stay away from fried foods, heavily processed foods, sugary foods, and you can have those in small portion. If you drink too much alcohol, of course, it slows down your digestion more, so you're going to feel sick with it. So what I do with my patients, I have them do a good nutrition consultation with my nutritionist to go over what they should eat, what they should stay away from, and they don't need to do a restricted diet, but there's a way to mitigate. And there are some patients that even at eating the right thing, they may be sensitive to it, they still have nausea. I go very, very low dose. I microdose it. When you microdose, you tend to have fewer side effects. And I have to say, I have a few patients, very few, I can almost count with one hand, with my 2 hands, less than 10 patients that they just cannot tolerate. Even at low doses, they get bad constipation, they get bad side effects. And I tell them, for you, that may not be a good choice. Let's go back to maybe the other options that we have. But for 95, 98% of my patients, I can microdose or find the right dose to really get you the benefits and avoid the side effects. And when it comes to the long-term side effects, now we have studies that showed mostly positive. And we're going to go over all of those studies with benefits on the brain health, heart health, liver health, inflammation, arthritis, sleep apnea, on and on and on. So, yes, there are possibility of short-term side effects, but we can mitigate them. And the most important side effect that I see, and that we're all worried about, is that those medications are so good at helping you lose weight, that as you lose weight, you can lose muscle mass. And what I see with my patients, you tend to lose muscle mass. The more you lose weight, the more you think. I tend to see it when patients get to the 20-pound mark, the 40-pound mark, the 50, 60-pound mark, and they can have significant muscle decline. The way I go and prevent that is from the first day I start with my patients. I tell them they have to exercise, not just go walking. They have to do resistance training, whether it's light weights, but make sure you activate your muscle. You have to eat enough protein. We tend to underestimate our protein. Usually you need about 1 gram per kilogram of protein. So if somebody weighs, let's say, 175, let's say somebody weighs 200 pounds, it's almost 100 kilos. It's about 90 kilos. You need about 90 grams, even 100, 120 grams of protein. When you take a GLP-1 medication, sometimes you can't eat that much protein because you get full quick. So I encourage my patient to take amino acids, to take protein shakes, make sure that they meet their protein needs and they do resistance training. That way you will not experience the severe muscle loss that you can see. And for patients who really, depending on their age, I check testosterone levels a lot. Because if a patient has low testosterone, they have more chances of having muscle loss. And the combination of testosterone, when indicated, and the GLP-1 medication is the closest thing to a fountain of youth that we've ever had. Why? Because the GLP-1 medication can help you lose weight, lose body fat, decrease inflammation, and the testosterone treatment, when indicated, increases your energy, increases muscle mass, and increases bone density. Closest thing to a fountain of youth.
So is this the part that we refer to the anti-aging tool, GLP, as a anti-aging tool with this thing that you're specifically saying that's how it works? Or is there any other beyond this? There are other effects too.
There are beyond, but let me tell you the anti-aging. So I see aging, I call it the double whammy of aging. Because as we age, and Vivek, you're not there yet, but by the time you get to 45, 50 years old, you will see that. As we age, even sometimes with good diet and exercise, you see that people tend to get more belly fat, what we call the visceral adipose tissue, VAT, visceral fat. It's the belly fat. You'll see people even when they're skinny, you see a little belly. You see that there's more fat accumulating, and we tend to lose our muscles, sarcopenia. So I call the double whammy of aging when you're losing muscle mass and you're gaining belly fat. This is what increases inflammation and increases so many chronic diseases like diabetes, heart attacks, and stroke. What addresses those two things? GLP-1 and testosterone. But today we're going to focus mostly on GLP-1. Why GLP-1 is considered now an age management shot, an anti-aging shot, because it affects your body fat and your visceral fat, your visceral adipose tissue like nothing we've ever had. Nothing has been as effective at decreasing belly fat as GLP-1 medication. And mostly, when I say GLP-1, both Semaglutide and Tirzepatide, but Tirzepatide even more. Beyond just the decrease in body fat, studies have shown that GLP-1 medication decrease the level of what we call inflammatory cytokines, meaning those are the hormones that cause inflammation in our body. Things like, those are big scientific words, TNF-alpha, tumor necrosis alpha, interleukin-6, interleukin-10. So those are tests that you can measure in your blood that show when you have high levels of inflammation. They've done studies where they put patients on GLP-1 and they've seen that those levels of inflammation went down. So it correlates with better aging. Because inflammation, there's a term that I like that is used out there, inflammaging. Inflammation causing aging. And where does inflammaging come from? The double whammy of aging. Increased visceral fat, decreased muscle mass. How do you remedy this? We have tools for that. And stop shaming people when they're trying to live a better life, when they're trying to be healthier. We need to go after health with whatever means necessary.
Makes sense. Little bit broader perspective now. It is obviously very transformative for not just for human health, but also the effects of these are also going to be on food, retail, and even healthcare system. So what's your perspective on the economic impact of these medications?
So we've never had a medication that Wall Street is talking about that much. Wall Street, the financial world, is scared of GLP-1 medication because patients who take GLP-1 medications don't want to eat junk food as much. They don't want to eat as large quantities, so become better educated consumers. Actually, the CEO of Cheez-It, the horrible cheese, fake cheese that we have in this country, came out and said that patients who take GLP-1s don't eat our products as much. So we're going to have to watch this, and we will mitigate that if their use continues to increase. Meaning that the CEOs of big companies like the fast food companies are talking about the use of GLP-1s, and they are looking for ways to possibly start writing a negative narrative about those medications to discourage people to be on this. because there was a study that was done by Walmart. They showed that people who are taking GLP-1s have fewer items on their cart at checkout. So it affects our behavioral, economical behavior. This is major. No other medication has done that. What I like and what gets me optimistic is a lot of companies are starting to get allied with GLP-1 medication. For example, I'm going to shout out to Smoothie King, which is a franchise we have in Florida, that they do smoothies. Smoothies have a lot of calories, a lot of sugar, if you don't pay attention to it. Well, guess what? They have a GLP-1 smoothie brand. No added sugar, more protein, fewer calories. Everybody should do that. Nestle, who was talking about this, Nestle has GLP-1 approved snacks now. Every company should start doing this, because and it shouldn't just be GLP-1. Our snacks should be less calorie dense. They should have fewer processed and preservatives. I'm pretty optimistic with the new, we're not going to talk politics, but with RFK Jr. that's going to be coming in, he's a biohacker. He's on testosterone therapy himself, and he likes peptides. And GLP-1 is a peptide. He believes in the empowerment of people to eat better. But yeah, we want people to eat better, but our food source is toxic. Our food source is horrible. So we need to empower patients into making better choices. Companies like alcohol companies hate GLP-1 medication, because studies show that when you take GLP-1 medications, you have less of a craving for alcohol. It's actually being studied to decrease alcoholism. And I see that in my patients all the time. When you take GLP-1 medication, you don't feel like drinking. You lost your taste for drinking. I have a lot of my patients who stopped drinking alcohol completely. That's a threat to the alcohol companies.
Wow.
So
And
it's changing our economic behavior. No other medication has ever done that.
and I was reading this stat also, like we are already seeing impact on, especially musculoskeletal procedures are already down by 30%, and
Yeah.
this has never happened before, and which makes me wonder, the health systems are still kind of, even though they know all those things, they're still behind on those things. They're not planning the way Wall Street is planning per se. So what do you think? Like, why is like the health systems are still like, are you listening? Are you seeing health system also being proactive and talking about things like what's to come sooner?
Well, it's starting. Unfortunately, the medical field, it's like a big ship that you try to turn. It has to take a wide turn. It's very slow. And doctors in the medical community tend to be very, very, very difficult to change their mind. They have what we call confirmation bias. What they know, they kind of like to hear and learn about of what they know. They're not really open to new ideas. I'm a very forward-minding physician. I'm a very, very progressive physician. That's why I was one of the first early adopters of GLP-1 for this. I'm seeing a lot more people talking about this, a lot more, even insurance companies are starting to get that. But I don't think people, doctors of medical centers, have realized the impact that GLP-1 medications can have on our healthcare. I'm going to give you a really strong statement right now, Vivek. In my opinion, GLP-1 medications are the most important medical breakthrough since the invention of penicillin. That is a very strong statement, and I can back it up. Penicillin was invented in the 1940s, late 1940s. And what was killing us during those years was infectious disease. So we needed antibiotics. So penicillin was invented, saved millions of lives. And, from there, all kinds of different antibiotics were invented. What is killing us now? The first 3 causes of death in the U.S. are metabolic disease, heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's dementia, and then cancer. All of those, 90% of those diseases can be related to metabolic disease. And when I say metabolic disease, that doesn't mean your metabolism. It means something going wrong with either your insulin sensitivity or inflammation. The latest study showed that 90% of Americans have some form of cardiometabolic dysfunction. 90%. I think it was up to 93%. That is crazy when you hear those numbers. So if we have something that can affect this much of the population, why wouldn't we say it more? So I have a really Not easy, but I have a solution for the metabolic crisis, the obesity crisis that we have. Government needs to subsidize medication like a GLP-1 in a center like mine. You do a weight loss clinic where you put a nutritionist, you put an exercise physiologist, you take a doctor that has really good knowledge of GLP-1 medication, and then you do it for a low copay, let's say $100, copay to the patient, because the patient has to have some skin in it. When patients pay money, they tend to be more compliant. Government should subsidize those medications at a low copay, get the patient to come in, see a nutritionist, see an exercise physiologist, see a psychologist, see a doctor. You would change the health of a city. You would change the health of a nation by doing this. Of course, it costs a lot of money at the front end, but the savings you would get at the back end would be enormous.
A lot. Just imagine that your per capita consumption of just food can go down. At a city level, that's a big, big change. Right?
Now,
And
is Wall Street ready for this? Because unfortunately, the U.S. is an economy of consumerism. If we consume less, what happens to the economy? But we should not maintain the economy on the back of the health of Americans. We should not maintain our economy with bad food. We need to change that. And another criticism that I get a lot from my colleagues is, Rudy, you focus on the wrong thing. We need to focus on changing the food source. We need to fight to make food become healthier. I'm like, I agree 100%. We need to. But that's a long fight. There's too much money in big food for us to change that quickly. Again, I'm very optimistic that now it seems like there's going to be a fight. But who's going to make, like those big food companies get us to eat healthier? That's what we need, but it's going to take years. In the meantime, we have something that we can use right now to empower patients to make better choices, to start loving their body again, to start being healthier. Here's a quick example. In the US, every year, there's about 170,000 deaths, cardiovascular death, dying of heart attacks. So there was an interesting study. It was called the SELECT trial that they did. That's this study that made Semaglutide become FDA-approved for heart disease. They followed about 17,000 patients, randomized them, and then for about 5 years. And they showed that patients taking Semaglutide had a 20% decrease in heart disease. And that 20% happened very early, meaning that you didn't have to lose that 50 pounds for them to see it. It's because they decrease inflammation. So now let's do a little quick calculation. Let's say 800,000 cardiovascular deaths a year. Let's say all those patients were on GLP-1. That would decrease the cardiovascular death by 20%. What's 20% of 800,000? You would save 160,000 deaths a year. How crazy is this?
big number.
Big number. And, Alzheimer's dementia, there's a recent study that showed that the use of semaglutide in patients can be associated with 40% up to 70% decrease in the incidence of Alzheimer's dementia. So why wouldn't we use that? So my question always is, let's say I came up and I did a big infomercial, right? And I'm like, I have a magical solution that's going to help you decrease your heart disease risk, decrease your Alzheimer's dementia, help you with your knee pain and your arthritis, decrease sleep apnea, help improve your liver health, your kidney health. How many people would I have calling me that I want this? But because it is a weight loss medication, there's a lot of stigma attached to
I, again, representing the patient population and you as a physician here, is like, I feel like I'm still not seeing medical community with full force advocating and coming out like, hey, this is what it is. That's how we're going to do it. Why do you think that's the case? Because I don't, I of course hear you and I feel like, yeah, makes sense completely. But then there is still this reluctance, right? And I feel like healthcare professionals are still not coming out in like full support of it. And that makes me like doubted. Like, that's how we feel it, right? Like you create a doubt in people's mind and then it's worse. Like we're not going to do that. Right. So,
And that's what it is. And again, it's today I had a patient who came in. Patient had high cholesterol. He was pre-diabetic, so didn't meet criteria for his insurance to be on GLP-1. Needed to lose about 30 pounds, was drinking too much. And when he went to see his doctor, the doctor was like, no, we don't know what the long-term side effects of those medications are. We talked about this in the beginning. That's false. We know. We know the benefits. And he kept telling the patient, join the gym, eat less, kept saying that. The patient was deemed non-compliant, was almost fired by his doctor because the patient could not lose weight. Came to see me in 6 months, that patient lost 45 pounds. Cholesterol got better. Blood sugar got better. He came off his blood pressure medication. He fired his doctor. And I told him, you should. Because to me, this is almost malpractice when you have a patient who's struggling with weight issues, metabolic issues, cholesterol issues, blood pressure issues, cannot lose weight, and you don't offer GLP-1 as an option. This is almost malpractice. It's taking a long time for people to understand this, but it's coming out more. And what we're doing here, I hope a lot of, I have a lot of my friends, a lot of the medical community who's watching this, and I'm excited for him to hear this because they need to hear that. I have a lot of passion for this, Vivek. You know this. And when I start talking, I can shut up because it is truly transformative. And the story that you said about that woman who texted you and was so excited that she had lost that 20 pounds, I hear that every day. It's so empowering. It's so transformative to the patient that we need to encourage this.
Makes sense, yeah. All right, this is great. Before we end today's episode,
I don't want it to end.
I want to ask you more, a little bit, again, futuristic view of this. So I guess there are a lot of things happening, but what is that excites you the most of its potential, especially a little bit in the future when you're looking into all the things, what's coming with GLPs and how things will change?
The future is bright for metabolic medicine, for obesity medicine, because Tirzepatide, Mounjaro, is really like the best of the best so far. But there's a lot of new ones that are coming down the pipeline. There's a new one called Redefine that's going to actually target all three receptors, all three hormones. And apparently the studies are looking really, really good. I haven't started using it yet. It's not out yet. There's other studies that they're looking at that they're going to have longer acting GLP-1s. That's something you can take once every 2 to 3 months instead of taking every day. The next big thing is going to be they're getting a good GLP-1 that's orally available that you can take by pills. Right now they have one by pill, but it's not as good. My patients who use it don't get as many results. So the injection is still the best. Some patients don't like to do injections. So that's an obstacle. So who knows in the next 5-10 years with our amazing scientists and with AI, what else we're going to discover on that pathway to help people with this. But the best bang for a healthcare buck right now is to address metabolic disease, address inflammation, address that double whammy of aging with a lot of the tools that we have. I like to say that a lot. Unfortunately, our food source now is toxic. I call the American diet, the standard American diet, it's called the SAD. The standard American diet is a weapon of mass destruction because our food is causing most of the metabolic disease and the metabolic death that we're seeing. So we need to revamp the standard American diet. We need to really make our food cleaner and healthier again. But until we do this, we have a tool like the GLP-1 that can empower patients into making better choices, improve their metabolic health, and live their best life.
And what about the insurance? And I heard there is a patent is going to go away and then the drugs will be cheaper after 5 years. Is there things like this happening in the near future?
Yeah, that's what we're hoping. For now, we're still using some of the generic compounds that come from, not generic, compounded formulations that come from compounded pharmacies because they're still in short supply. So when those medications are in short supply, the FDA allows compounded pharmacies to compound it. A lot of the pharmacies, what they do, they add something to it. For example, they may add B12 to say it's not exactly the same. So there's a lot of litigation, a lot of things happening. I like to say that I am agnostic to how you take your GLP-1. I don't care how you take it, whether you take the brand name, the compounded, whether you travel and go buy it somewhere else for cheaper. But if you're dealing with weight issues, if you're dealing with metabolic issues, find a way to be on a GLP-1. And interesting enough, I was in London this past summer and I had a podcast with a pharmacist. Do you know the same Semaglutide or Mounjaro, the same Eli Lilly or Novo Nordisk brand name medication is about $150 in Europe. Same thing. Why is it $1,500 in this country? There's a problem with this. So the excuse that I hear from the pharmaceutical companies is that we have to pay for R&D, research and development. Why is it so cheap in Europe? Why is it so cheap in Canada, in South America? So people will take a trip. I have people who take a trip to South America. They pay a ticket $200 and they buy 6 months' worth because it costs maybe $100 there. So why is it in this country that we make it so expensive? So insurance, government, politics, there's a lot of big players moving in this. That's not my world. I'm a clinician. I like to work with patients and help patients. Something will happen, but the genie cannot be put back in the bottle. People will not stop using GLP-1 because it is really, really saving lives.
Literally, couple of days ago, I saw a Canadian pharmacy website where the messaging literally was, as my market your mind, I was reading, and it was all about, we get cheaper GLP, 90% lesser cost to our European patients, American patients. And I was like, wow, it's like literally just stating the problem we have in our healthcare system.
The problem, but I'm going to tell you, a lot of times now, they're sold out in Canada. My patient last week told me he used to get it from Canada, sold out. I have a patient who used to go to Dominican Republic and gets his Ozempic there, sold out. Because now obesity is no longer just a first world problem.
Yep.
It's a global issue. So this is being used by every country. So every country that makes it, their own citizens are using it now. So it's before Americans used to go anywhere and buy it. Now the word is out. So companies like Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, I hope that they keep ramping up their production and be able to meet the demands. It was estimated, last one I saw, that about 9% of the U.S. population is on a GLP-1. To me, that's that they underestimate because they don't count the people who are taking the compounded medication. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 12%. Like I said before, 70% of the population is either overweight or obese. 70% of the population should have access to those medications. If you're overweight or obese or you have metabolic dysfunction, you should have access to this at a decent price. Health should matter first.
I agree. On that note, this has been great. Thank you once again. I think this was a power-packed, insightful episode, and I'm sure this will be even more popular than our previous episodes.
Yes. Call me the GLP-1 whisperer. Call me the GLP-1 king. Call me the GLP-1 whatever you want. But I'm going to keep screaming.
I want to point out the review that we had. And it stated, Dr. Rudy is a walking GLP god. I really like that.
I'm gonna caution this with my love-hate relationship with those medications. It's not all roses and petals. If somebody's listening to this, you need to find a doctor or clinician who have a lot of experience with this and help you navigate the possible side effects. If you don't need it, if you can do it by yourself, good for you. But if you can't, let's go.
Exactly.
Come on, baby.
All right. This has been great. Thank you so much again for such a, I would say, like, outpour of knowledge. And everybody needs it. And this is in such a structured way that you put across. I feel like this is going to be great again, just for everyone who listens. So once again, thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Vivek.